It started with a phone call. Not a scream, not a struggle, not a witness. Just a phone call in the middle of the night. At 2:17 a.m., in a quiet dorm room on the 3rd floor of Halden Hall, sophomore psychology major Daniel Owusu answered a call that would be the last confirmed moment anyone ever heard his voice. His roommate said Daniel didn't sound scared. He didn't sound angry. He sounded confused, like someone trying to recognize a voice from a dream. And then, after less than 40 seconds, he said 4 words that would later haunt an entire campus. "I thought you were..." The call ended. Daniel grabbed his hoodie, left his phone behind, walked out into the night, and vanished. No signs of struggle, no forced exit, no digital trail, no sightings after that moment. Just a young man who walked out of his dorm and was never seen again. For weeks, the investigation led nowhere. Search teams combed the woods. Divers checked the river. Police interviewed students, professors, even strangers. Nothing. Until now. Because months later, investigators finally discovered the identity of the person on the other end of that call. And the truth was something no one was prepared for. Halden University was the kind of campus people described as safe. Too safe, some students joked. Tree-lined paths, open courtyards, security patrols every hour. Nothing ever happened there. Which is why Daniel's disappearance felt impossible. Daniel wasn't the type to run away. He had plans, midterms coming up, a research assistant position he was excited about, and a scholarship he couldn't afford to lose. He was structured, routine-driven, predictable. Every night he called his younger sister at 9 p.m. Every morning he ran at 6. He hated surprises. But the night he vanished, something disrupted that routine. At exactly 2:17 a.m., Daniel's phone rang. Campus records would later show the number was unregistered. No name, no history, no location ping. Just a connection that lasted 38 seconds. His roommate, Ibrahim, had been awake at the time. He remembered the glow of the phone lighting Daniel's face. Remembered Daniel frowning, sitting up, answering quietly, "Hello?" A pause. Then, "Who is this?" Another pause. Longer this time. Daniel swung his legs off the bed. "I think you have the wrong..." He stopped mid-sentence. Listened. His expression changed. Confusion replaced by something else. Recognition. Or maybe disbelief. Then came the last thing Ibrahim ever heard Daniel say. "I thought you were..." Silence. The call ended. Daniel stared at the phone for a moment. Not afraid, just unsettled. He stood up, pulled on his hoodie, slipped into his sneakers, and walked out. No explanation, no note, no phone, no return. At first, Ibrahim thought nothing of it. Students left at odd hours all the time. But by morning, Daniel still hadn't come back. His bed untouched, his morning run missed, his 9 a.m. class unattended. By noon, concern turned into panic. By evening, the campus knew. Daniel was missing. Campus security pulled surveillance footage. They saw him leave Halden Hall at 2:19 a.m., hands in pockets, walking calmly, alone. He didn't look like someone being followed. He didn't look like someone in danger. He looked like someone going to meet someone. But no cameras ever caught who. Search teams were deployed within hours. Friends printed flyers. Volunteers combed through wooded trails behind campus. Police drained a nearby pond. Nothing. No footprints. No discarded clothing. No signs of violence. His phone remained in his room, his wallet untouched, his laptop still open to an unfinished assignment. Days passed, then weeks. Rumors began. Some said he'd met someone secretly. Others claimed he'd been depressed. One theory suggested he'd uncovered something during his psychology research. But investigators had only one solid lead: the call. And they couldn't trace it. Not to a tower, not to a device, not even to a service provider. It was as if the call had never existed. Except for one thing. Daniel's dorm landline, rarely used, had captured a partial signal interference during the moment of connection. Not the voice, just a faint audio distortion, like background noise bleeding into the line. At first it meant nothing, until an audio analyst enhanced it and heard something that changed everything. Not words, not breathing, but a sound, a soft, rhythmic tapping, like fingernails on wood, and beneath it, a whisper. Not from the caller, from Daniel, almost too quiet to detect, but unmistakable. He had said, "You're not supposed to call me." The moment investigators heard that whisper, the case shifted. Because Daniel hadn't sounded surprised by the caller. He'd sounded disturbed by their existence. Someone he knew. Someone who wasn't supposed to contact him. Detectives turned their attention inward. His friends, his classmates, his professors, and eventually, his past. Daniel had transferred to Halden just 6 months before his disappearance. Before that, he'd attended another university 2 states away. He left abruptly. No farewell, no explanation. Just a transfer request filed mid-semester. At the time, it seemed like a fresh start, but now it looked like an escape. When investigators contacted his former school, they discovered something unsettling. Daniel had been involved in a research study, not as a participant, but as an assistant. The project had focused on auditory perception and memory recall, specifically, how the human brain responds to familiar voices. The study had been led by a doctoral candidate named Miriam Kessler. Brilliant, private, obsessively dedicated to her work, and currently, unreachable. She had withdrawn from the program shortly after Daniel transferred. No forwarding address, no social media, no digital footprint after that point. Just gone. At first, it seemed like a coincidence, until investigators listened again to the enhanced audio from the call. The tapping. They ran it through sound pattern analysis, compared it to environmental databases. Wood, metal, plastic. No match. Then someone had an idea. They pulled archived recordings from the research lab Daniel once worked in. Hours of experimental sessions. Volunteers recalling voices of loved ones. Participants reacting to manipulated audio. And in one recording, buried in the background of a test session, was the same tapping sound. Identical rhythm, same spacing. It came from Miriam's habit of tapping her fingernails on the wooden desk during sessions. The realization sent shockwaves through the investigation. They pulled her file and found something else. She had once conducted an unauthorized test, one not included in official documentation. A test exploring emotional attachment to voice recognition, using real personal recordings, private conversations, voicemail samples, even phone calls. Daniel's name appeared in the margins of her notes, not as a participant, but as a subject of observation. The final note in her file read, "He responds to familiar voices even when context is impossible." Police tracked down Miriam's last known address, a rented house on the outskirts of the previous university town. Abandoned, but not empty. Inside, they found recording equipment, stacks of audio drives, and one labeled D.O. They played it, and heard Daniel's voice. Conversations he'd had with friends, with family, with professors, all secretly recorded. Then, at the end of the file, a simulated call. Miriam had recreated voices using layered recordings, testing whether Daniel could distinguish real from fabricated. The final experiment log included one chilling entry. If the right voice calls, he will come. Back at Halden, investigators reviewed the timeline. At 2:17 a.m., Daniel received a call from an untraceable source. He listened, recognized the voice, and left. Not in fear, but in response, as if summoned. Which raised the most terrifying question of all. Whose voice did he hear? The answer came from the final audio drive. A reconstructed voice, built from years of recordings. A voice Daniel would trust without hesitation. A voice he would follow into the night. The voice of someone who wasn't alive anymore. His mother, dead for 3 years. And according to Miriam's final experiment notes, she had finally perfected it.